very much. Yes, this talk will be in English, but you can ask me in German or interrupt me in German. You can also try to interrupt me in any other language if you try. I don't know if I can understand that. You can try. So, this talk is about why Agile isn't enough. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting actually when I was here before the keynote and people approached me already. Why is Agile not enough? So everybody asked me this. Many asked me this question already, but I always said, yeah, this is my talk, so please come to my talk. So I will hear that. So I apologize for everybody. So say no, I can't give you the answer right away. Just about myself, there's some personal information you can see there that I have done some research in the early 2000s already. I did my PhD thesis about organizational structures, agile software development and project management. So I have back then analyzed over 50,000 projects, done all the mathematics around it and tried to figure out why projects fail and things like that, or which organizational structures work well with agility and so on and so on. So this was in the early days of Agile actually. Of course, things changed a little bit, but some of the conclusions are still the same. And when I said some approached me outside, if you want to approach me later on and talk to me, please talk to me about cars, music, or comics. So I prefer that. No, seriously, you can talk about everything with me. Have you experienced something like that already? Some of you probably. Yes, I see some heads nodding, some hands going up. Yeah, me too. So it's still the same, you know, I'm in this business I'm in Agile now actually since the beginning. So the Agile Manifesto in 2001 was just the beginning to call this Agile, but everything else was there before. And, you know, it's still the same situation like 20, 30 years back. And if you look at that, and I'm really, I was excited because Una in the keynote used pretty much the similar, you know, trend and counter-trend approach. So this is pretty much what I experienced in some enterprises. And this talk is a lot about the big companies, the big players, enterprise environments, and also some of my personal experiences with that. You know, it's a little bit of a case study, but not just. Yeah, because I'm currently in the situation that I'm working with a huge international company, and I have the position, and now it's getting exciting really. I have the position as a program manager. Totally agile, right? So, but we'll see if that fits together. Teams optimize deliveries within their boundaries while the entire organization remains slow. Projects are successful by plan, but nobody's happy with it, and programs coordinate dependencies, but still the big picture stays blurry. This is something I experience every day. And one of the biggest takeaways for me from my job and all the other things I've did in the past is, at least this is my impression or my observation, we manage execution better than direction. Is this something, is that just me, or do you feel the same or similar? Yeah? No? Maybe? Could be? Yeah, we'll see. How this shows up in daily work, I mean, many initiatives, priorities changing frequently, decisions taking too long, or there are no decisions at all, people cannot or will not take responsibility, accountability, and local optimization beats global optimization, or global outcomes. This is something I can also observe every day, especially in this program I'm working in currently, and this program covers 4 big projects, and they're really international projects. So one is focused on Europe, the other one is worldwide, and so on. I have signed an NDA, so I can work. Yeah, like I said, what did I signed an NDA, but I don't give too much away if I tell you one of these projects had its deadline 4 years in the past. That's when I took it over. So I'm not 4 years in the past, but now, and it was the situation. So this is what I'm talking about. You know? typically the responses to what you saw before is we introduce new frameworks, we introduce new roles, new tools, more coordination meetings, yada yada yada. I think you have all seen that. Do I need to use the microphone? Okay. One of the outcomes, or not just one, summary of outcomes in my PhD thesis was, when I did the analysis and all this mathematics or statistical mathematics around it, was that projects fail mainly because of vendor problems, unrealistic schedules, inadequate or misunderstood requirements, missing executive commitment, or low team motivation. Yeah. For me, it's still symptoms. That's still not root causes. Even if we have executive commitment, or if we have the biggest team motivation, or if we have the most realistic schedules and so on, there might be still some problems. So, I said it's a little bit of a case study. This is the program I am currently in. This is some of the other ones, two of my past, the finance area, telecommunications. The automotive one is a global program, multiple plants worldwide, etc. Effects are delays, firefighting, escalation loops, etc. So these are the effects you can see. One of my past case study, or my past project we have worked in, is we had these agile teams delivering. There was safe in place. Plannings happened with 100, 200, 300 people in rooms or virtual rooms, wherever. Okay, that's an interesting talk today. We're talking about agility, right? So it's technically agility now.
That's the best kind of agility.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for helping with that. Is it now working? 1, 2, 1, 2. Yes, thank you. Awesome. Yeah, even delivery happened faster, but not better, whatever better means. Yeah, in the finance area, it was really interesting because there was a very strong governance, many KPIs introduced and so on, but still this slow decision making because not just one person had to make a decision. It has to be a committee or a steering group or 5 different levels of decision, etc. You know what I mean, right? So this is what I experienced in the past, what I worked in. And they, of course, tried all the different kinds of solutions with Scrum, OKRs, more governance, better tools, etc., blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And of course, there were some improvements. They did something better, but there was one problem. There was no alignment of the whole, of the entire thing, right? Whatever it was, whether it was a program or project, product development, it didn't matter. It was always the same situation. No alignment of the whole. And one thing which I want to squeeze in here is, if we're talking about methods, frameworks, etc., no single method or framework covers everything. I have not experienced that. I've seen frameworks, and SAFe is one of the examples that tries to cover everything, but still it's not true. It's not they are focusing on something. They have been optimized for something, yeah? Created for something. So that means they are not covering everything. What really works is if you blend practices with the same orientation, yeah? Whatever that means. I come to that later. Yeah? I just wanted to squeeze that in here, so this is like a little bit of a cliffhanger now. If you look at the framework, Scrum, of course, quickly summarized. It's iterative delivery, the transparency, team autonomy, but they do not define enterprise code systems, vendor governance, etc. So they don't cover that. If you go to traditional project management, for example, they are providing good approaches for risk management, procurement, controlling, etc., but the lack of adaptability, what it will say, some words we shouldn't use, learning loops and so on, yeah. So, but we all want to know how to fix that, right? So these are the problems, which is great, and I had also on my LinkedIn profile, I'm an Agile coach, and coaching is about telling people what does not work and telling them you need to fix them and give them hints, but not telling them how to fix it, right? So that's coaching, Agile coaching. Sorry, not coaching, Agile coaching. No, okay, I'm a little bit nasty with that, sorry. Let's do it the cooking show style. So let's switch the whole talk into a cooking show style. Ever seen a cooking show? Yeah. I've prepared Okay. If we want to create a meal, a dish, what do we need? Of course, we need first the situation. Actually, our situation, it may taste a little bit confusing, heavy, slightly burned, so it doesn't taste good. And to fix that and to redo it in a better way, we need ingredients, some kind of recipe. Oh, recipes in the Agile world. Go away. No, seriously, we need a recipe and a little bit of experience with the art of cooking. So that's what we are trying to do now, what I'm going to do with you. Let's take the first ingredient, which should fix something, like these diffuse priorities, endless discussions, and local optimizations. We take the ingredient of a goal. We're creating goals now. I'm not talking about OKRs or something like that. I'm talking about pure goals, right? Could be a very interesting ingredient for our situation. So, where do we get all the theory from? Of course, to everything there are models and stuff and theory behind that. Where I take the theory from is the goal setting theory from Locke and Latin. Ever heard about that before? Anybody? It's a part of organizational psychology. It's research that started in the 60s, late 60s, but it's still ongoing. So it's always evolving and improving and so on. So this is the theory where it comes from when we talk about goals. And you see they have created 5 validated mechanisms that goals should give a direction. Goals can increase intensity of action. Persistence is very important, strategy is very important, and learning is very important. Agile learning, okay, there seems to be some match, right? I'm not teaching now goal setting theory and also not teaching the theory behind the other ingredients. I'm just telling you these are the ingredients we are going to use. Second ingredient, outcome milestones. So milestones is a very traditional term once again, traditional project management and stuff, right? But outcome milestones. Task-driven, that should fix task-driven reporting, phase progress, or different interpretations of time. Where do we take this from? Any suggestions? Sorry? User stories. User stories. No. Any other suggestions? You're all in the Agile community, come on. I said already no to user stories. I know my next answer will be also no. The next recommendation. No, we take that from something really not very many people know. There is a method, or it's not even a method, there is something which was created in the 80s by some Norwegian guys, professors at universities and so on. And they created something which is called goal-directed project management. And the interesting part of that is they say we always, if we do a project, we always need to look at the people, the system, and the organization. So every project is a transformation effort. Every project is transforming something. This was the rationale or the motivation to create that, right? So they approached it differently to traditional project management. Even in the 80s, when BMI and all these kind of things got stronger and stronger, these institutions, they came already up with something which I would call nowadays totally agile. Yeah. Not Scrum, not Kanban, this kind of thing. Yeah. Organizational viability. That should fix the political conflicts, the slow decisions, and the agile islands in rigid systems. So where can we get something like that from? What is organizational viability? What does viability mean? Anyone knows that word? Matrix. That's organizational structure, yeah. But viability means that an organization can. Resilience is a very modern word that's often used in this context, right? So an organization can survive, an organization can exist like an organization, and everybody in the organization can interact with each other and so on. That's all covered in organizational viability. And there's a very interesting approach it was formalized in the 70s, but the origins are from the 50s actually. Has not only to do with organizations, because that was also done with the leaders of Chile, so this has also to do with politics, and Stafford Beer, back in the 70s, thought, okay, what if we compare organizations to organisms? Yeah, human body, human organism, or the human organism. Are they the same mechanisms? Are there similar mechanisms and so on? So how does that work? You know, the nervous system is transporting information through the organization. The brain is steering and controlling it, and so on and so on. So he did exactly that in one of his books, The Brain of the Firm. Yeah? He created the viable system model and said, okay, in every organization we have 5 different systems. The operational system, so value creating units like teams, plants, departments, and so on. We have a coordination system that stabilizes the interaction between them. We have then the control system, also some audit channels maybe, an intelligence system that looks outward into the future, so strategic thinking towards the future, innovation, etc., kind of things. And policy system defines identity, values, and overall direction. You know, talking in the 70s about values, you know, which was created in the 50s. Agile made it more popular, but these are very much origins of all of that we are talking about it under the umbrella term of agility nowadays. And the very interesting thing for me is, in the viable system model, it says, if you look at the organization, then zoom into a department maybe, and then zoom into in a team, we have always the same systems. This is recursive, this is recursion, right? We have all 5 systems in the organization, we have all 5 systems in the department, and we have all 5 systems in the teams. So this is the logic behind that, yeah? It's not changing, it's smaller of course, not less complex, but it's still the same systems. So we take that for organizational viability. Then, flow. What comes to your mind if you hear flow? If it's silent, I must assume nothing. Say it older.
Oh, that's a Hungarian name, Csikszentmihalyi. About the flow when you are really inside something, focusing and gathering more energy than losing, and then time flies. Focus.
Yeah, focus. Yeah, also, yeah, interesting. Thank you very much. With flow, we want to fix permanent lateness, overloaded teams, illusory plans, you know, these schedules nobody can realistically really achieve somehow. So this is what we want to, where we want to use flow for that. The origin where we get it from is probably this one. Theory of constraints and critical chain project management. Have you heard about that? Yeah, there's a very interesting book out there from Mr. Goldrat, which is called The Goal. Coincidentally, there's a connection to Ghost, I don't know why. But yes, this is where we take this from. Theory of constraints, briefly summarized, means his theory is that in every system, in every organization, there's one constraint, and if you get rid of that or fix that problem, you fix 90% of the rest. So this one is the biggest lever, so it makes a huge difference. You don't need to fix 20, 50, 100. If you find this particular one problem, or this constraint, then you can fix the effect is huge, right? So this is very briefly summarized. That's not the whole message about that, of course, but very briefly summarized, this is an idea behind that. And in critical chain project management, he created this kind of project management method around that. Yeah? Going away from critical path thinking, if you heard about that, or burst diagrams and so on, all these kind of things, more to a critical chain, where you also have the capacity as a parameter of the deeper in there and so on. And critical change is the connection of all. Not just the critical path anymore, or the happy path, but the critical chain. Yeah? And so it's really interesting. So the goal I can really recommend to read it, even if you're pure agilist. That makes sense to read. So, and the one everybody was waiting for, because we had the Agile Austria conference, empirical learning. Yes. feedback loops, fast, short feedback loops, regular inspection of outcomes, and so on and so on. So where do we take this from? This one from, this ingredient? Yeah, I think that's the obvious one. So it's agility pretty much. So, actually, let's do a quick thinking experiment. Empirical learning, if we look at, let's go back to this one. These are the obvious ones. We are talking about product development so much. If we are talking about Scrum and so on, they were designed for product development. For nothing else, yeah? Scrum was only for product development, not for service and operations and maintenance and stuff, no. But there are other approaches that work really well in service and operations, and also in retail and customer-facing organizations. Of course, you can use this agile thinking and agile mindset for something. So empirical learning and the quick thinking experiments I wanted to do with you together is, if you look at a supermarket chain, I mean, of course, they won't apply Scrum. They won't use Scrum for that. I mean, look at the time. No, I don't have the time. How much time do I have left?
20 minutes.
20 minutes, okay, so very good. If you look at that, there is still something that could be done the empirical learning way, like short feedback loops on sales, waste, stock outs, experiments with pricing, layouts, promotions, and so on and so on. So even this agile thinking and this empirical learning, if we take this from agile, works also in other industries and in other situations than product development. We can still use that for that. Yeah. So let's move on, because of course if you want to have a meal, it's nice to have the ingredients, the separate ingredients, but nobody is going to use, you know, flour and sugar and water and eggs separately and put it in the mouth and then say, oh, great taste. No, we need to bring that together. We need to cook that somehow. Yeah. I want to show you this, and this is an idea how we can define layers in an organization, so the enterprise operating stack. It's not quite working well for small startups with 5 people, so that's a different situation, but I'm really talking about enterprise operating, of these layers for enterprises. So, we have 5 different layers here. The first one is the operating logic. And these are the rules by which goals are defined, evaluated, and conflicts are resolved. Yeah? So, briefly. Then we have the organizational system design. This is when we create organizational structures and so on. Then we have the coordination and steering area. This is where coordination, steering, scheduling, prioritization across initiatives and so on happens. Yeah, for example, when we introduce the project management methods or the scaling frameworks and stuff like that. Then we have day-to-day delivery, so this is where we can find Scrum, Kanban, and so on. And then we have, of course, have tools and practices such as user stories. So that would be this layer here in my understanding. Of course, you can challenge me if you want to. So, let's compare that, just to do a quick check if that makes sense somehow. Let's compare it to an operating system metaphor on a computer, because they have similar stacks and similar layers. There's the operating logic, which sits, for example, in Windows, Linux, Mac OS, and so on, where we have all the scheduling rules, the priority queues, preemption, and stuff like that. Yeah. Then we have the organizational system design. That's the architecture above that. We have coordination and steering. That's where aligning and synchronizing happens. So process orchestration, runtime coordination, ways of working. That's where we can. Here we can find the application, pretty much. And tools and practices is UI components and everything above that, to visualize it and so on and so on. The apps sit here on a computer on layer 3 and 4. But we have here the logic and the rules that these apps can operate, that they can work, that they can interact between each other and so on. The logic is here, and they use the logic underneath it. Does that help to understand what I meant before with the organizational layers in an organization, or not yet? Okay. Yeah, to make it a little bit more tangible as well. where does Windows and Linux, for example, live? That's the kernel, the operating system layer. So nobody would say Windows is partially an application, partially a driver, partially a UI and so on. So it's really the logic underneath all of that. What we need to understand is all of these are different layers, of course, but the effects, if you start with layer 1 where all the rules and so are defined, the effects span all the other layers. Yeah? That's the basis, the foundation for everything pretty much. One common mistake I see in many organizations, and that's one of the biggest problems, and now we are getting to the point where I say Agile alone is not enough, right? You're still interested in the reason? Okay. Of course, there is this problem that we heard so often, or at least I heard it often in advertising, marketing, sales speeches. Scrum, Kanban, less safe, they solve the problem. They solve our problems and fix everything. Yeah? But we're talking about layer 3 and 4 in my model, in my mental model here, in this stack. Of course, we need to select the right framework for the situation we're in. If you're in product development, Scrum makes sense, no doubt about that, right? But if you're in a different situation, Scrum probably makes no sense at all. Yeah. On layer, layer 4. Also on layer 3, if you're talking about scaling large enterprises, large organizations, of course we need to come up with this kind of complexity controlling that many Scrum teams can interact and stuff like that. Yeah. However, the problem is, if there is really a problem in the organization, we need to address layer 1 and 2 first and see what fits or what kind of application, what kind of layer 3 and 4 things to work in our situation, for our initiatives, for our environment and so on. That's the mismatch I see so often. We try to fix problems which are sitting in layer 1 and 2 with layer 3 and 4 solutions. It's not going to work, right? So that problem is really, even the best app does not make a slow machine fast. That's not going to work. We need to fix the machine first. Yeah? If we jump into steering a little bit and match that to the layer approach, at layer 1 we need to decide why are we doing this as all goals directions. At layer 2 is who decides what and how are conflicts resolved. So we don't have that in Scrum, for example. There's nothing saying about how to resolve a conflict. There's as a product owner organizing the work and saying that's the highest priority. But what if from the outset there is a conflict? Of course, implicitly the product owner should solve that. But how? That's not mentioned there, right? Layer 4, how do teams organize? Layer 5, steering is how do we make work visible and measurable. That's where KPIs and all these kind of things we also already mentioned come into play. So, what also an interesting approach is that many organizations try to install virtual machines, right? We have this 10 minutes only. But I get 5 more because there was a technical problem. Okay. So, with virtual machines, I mean, we have this huge organization, command and control and hierarchy oriented and so on, and then we have a Scrum team. Yeah. We separate the Scrum team from the rest of our organization. That's like, creating a special, separate other operating system within the operating system. Does that make sense? Who says yes? Some say yes. Who says no? Partially. Yeah, the favorite sentence. It depends. Yeah, definitely. It depends, of course. Well, yes and no. It makes sense in my understanding when specific initiative needs a different operating logic. Then we can isolate that within the organization. And then it makes sense. When the teams need different processes, decision rules, and permission schemes and stuff like that. So temporary solutions. Yeah, for temporary problems, or if you want to fix something very specific, then it can make sense. If we really want to have the whole organization to work differently, then obviously it doesn't make any sense at all, because this one virtual Scrum team, this virtual machine in there, doesn't change the entire organization. It can be an inspiration to change the organization, yes, but it's not automatically happening. So that's why I said yes and no. In computer language, you can increase speed temporarily with virtual machines. You can even build container-based organizations if you like. But then, of course, you also need to adjust the operating logic for that first. Otherwise, once again, it's not going to happen. It's not going to make them change. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, virtual machines can isolate problems, but they cannot replace a coherent operating system. So, back to cooking. We had the goals, the outcomes, the viable structures, the flow, and the learning as ingredients. Yeah. Let's create a kind of model. That's a thought experiment. Let's create something which is more a goal-directed organizational model, right? This is a synthesis of what we had before of the ingredients. So that means the goal-setting theory, the goal-directed project management, and so on. You can read it there. Agile frameworks, if we talk about that, Scrum, Kanban, extreme programming, etc., they are applications, layer 3 and layer 4. We are not trying to replace them, but we're trying to give them the operating logic so that they can really work well. And this is what's underneath it. Yeah? And that should be then probably something like this goal-directed organizational model. I jump over that. The core principles of that would be goals before methods, outcomes before activities, system before local optimization, flow before utilization, and learning before prediction. Yeah. Sounds a bit like the Agile Manifesto. We can say it's a goal-directed manifesto. I'm not saying that. I just say we could say that. And the operating logic relies on the psychology, the endeavor, the organization, and the delivery. So we have also these aspects coming into play now. We want individual and team goal commitment, we want outcome milestones in goal alignment, we want viability, governance, and we want the flow and the learning cycles. And like I said, we can take that from the ingredients we have already. So all of that is there. There's a chance that this really starts to making sense now. Like I said, it's not another application, but it's the operating logic, all the rules, or for example, if conflicts exist or if decisions need to be made, it's the rules about that, how to do it. Yeah? So it provides for everything that's above that then, for example, Scrum, Kanban, XP or something else, even traditional project management, the logic that it really can work. When people look back at the cases which I showed you before, so the program I'm currently in or the ones from my past, so automotive industry, telecommunications, finance, very different industries by the way. So with different requirements how to run an organization. But there's one thing that was always the same. We had the same problems, we had competing goals, we had local optimization, we had overloaded coordination and delivery success without system improvement. So the key observation for me was the real problem was not execution speed or something. The problem was missing goal coherence across the levers and across the layers. Yeah, and that's, in my understanding, what really could fix many of these problems, which are, in my understanding, nowadays symptoms, not really the problems. The root cause, or we go back to the theory of constraint, is one problem we should fix is really the alignment or the consistency across goals. So if we zoom into a team and say, for this team we have this goal, or even individual goals, you know, people have every day their employee conversation with the superiors, they have goals, personal goals and so on. Each goal should be in sync with the other ones, and each goal should pay into the other goals. So if you get at least this kind of goal coherence, and if they are not coherent, how to resolve this problem, this conflict, if you have this logic in place, then probably really fix all the other problems we might have in the organization. Maybe not all of them, so that the coffee tastes bad, I don't know if it fixes that, but at least all which are related to operate. Yeah? To operate, to run the companies, the organizations. That's why I said Agile alone is not enough. We need a little bit more than that, and that starts with this operating logic, in my understanding. Thank you very much. Where's my timekeeper?
Yes, we still have time for some questions.
Okay.
Maybe one for free.
For Nami.
One small question. Can we maybe take it a little bit further?
Sure. Sorry.
Ah, sorry.
Please do.
Hi, thank you very much. Can we maybe take it a little bit further and think about the private goals also?
Yeah.
For each employer or for each work?
Yes. Actually, in this program I'm in currently, I have this private goal conflict frequently now. People are telling me they have this private goal so that they get the bonus by the end of the year, and they tell me I need to deliver this or I need to come up with something like that and so on. And I say to them, actually, it's not gonna happen because the priorities, the global priorities, are different. You won't get the support for that, but they are pulling in this direction, of course, because they want to get their bonus. But pulling in this direction is the opposite direction of the global goals, and I have this really almost every day at the moment. So what I'm really trying to fix there is to get this coherence in this goal setting kind of thing. And if people tell me, but if I cannot achieve that, I'm not getting my bonus, I'm saying, come to me, I write you a letter, I talk to your boss that we can change your goals, so that's really starting to make sense and that all the goals fit together. That's what I'm trying to put there at the moment. Which is a lot of effort. Painful.
Thank you. Sorry, no, my question would be, I mean, you get thrown at to solve the problem on level 3 and 4, but how do you approach that the problem is higher and how do you solve that or get the attention for the problem on level 1 and 2?
Yeah, maybe that's a person, that's me, but I just do it. I go to these people who can make the decisions, you know. For example, in this automotive industry, in this organization, they are now called vice presidents. So there's one vice president for Europe, one vice president for North America, one vice president for Asia. And if people are telling me that's not happening, that's not working, then these are the people I address this problem to. I try to get their attention at least. Their understanding that we need to change something because they have goals. They need, they need to survive. They need to make money. Of course, that's not in this economy currently. But and if, for example, personal goals or more local optimization, if they come up with initiatives and so much work which has nothing to do with these global goals and so on, then that's exactly where I go to. I need to address this to the right people. That's my solution. Don't be afraid, just because they are vice presidents and they are important people and on TV, I don't care. I need them.
Just for information, the remote people can also write down a question in the chat, and in the meantime we will can answer another question.
If there is another one.
If there is another one, otherwise we will check the chat. No reaction.
No. Okay, just one information for you guys. You can download of course there's a newsletter, so that's the most important information. You can download the slides, and we have also backup slides because something may sound like something else, and I've also added to the slide deck, which I didn't show in the talk, that you can compare to what's the operating logic for OKR, or compare to OKR, so the scaling frameworks and so on. So also resource management, team topologies, org topologies. I've created some more information if you'd like to have a look at that. And of course, if you have questions afterwards, feel free to approach me and contact me. So there's also my contact information somewhere in there. Here it is. Thank you very much. Have a great remaining Agile Austria. Austria conference and hope to see you at the meeting tonight.